It started with a phone call, one that lasted 22 minutes and 48 seconds, but split me open like an old wound I thought I had bandaged years ago. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, folding impossibly tiny socks, mint green, pale yellow, and soft lavender ones with little clouds stitched along the toes. My belly sat heavily in my lap, the weight of 39 weeks pressing down like the whole world was curled up inside me. The phone buzzed, my mom's name flashing across the screen. Mom calling. My throat tightened. I knew why she was calling. And I also knew she wouldn't give me the answer I wanted. I picked it up anyway. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft and strained, like she had been crying and pretending she hadn't. "How are you feeling today?" I swallowed the lump that rose instantly. "Big. Tired. Ready. The doctor says maybe any day now." "Oh, baby." I could hear the ache in her tone. I wish I could be there. And there it was, the wish. The apology buried in possibility. The silent knowing between us. "Me too," I said, trying to keep the edge from my voice. "I failed. But you can be. You just won't." Silence. The kind that hums with all the things we never said in our family. It's not that I hadn't tried. I had. For years. I begged her to stand up to him. I pleaded with her to put her foot down, to choose me, just once, when it mattered most. She never did. My stepfather, Frank, had always been the immovable object. He was the king of manipulation. The kind of man who told jokes that made your skin crawl. The kind who didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, the walls remembered it for weeks. Who always made sure you knew who had the final say. And she chose him. Even after he tried to ban her from attending my engagement party because he didn't like my fiancé. Even after he said he wouldn't allow her to go comfort me when I called her sobbing the night I called off the wedding. Even after he told her that I was trying to drive a wedge between them when all I'd ever wanted was to be loved without conditions. Her voice cracked on the line. "He says if I go, he'll come with me. And if I say no, he'll know something's up. He'll think I'm hiding something." "You are hiding something, Mom," I whispered. "You're hiding me." I didn't mean to say it, but it came out too fast, too sharp, like a wound finally ripping open. She didn't answer right away. Then, it's not that simple. Maybe it's not. But it also kind of is. My hands were shaking. I didn't know if it was rage or heartbreak. "He's not welcome in my home. That's it. That's the line." "I know." I paused. "So, what are you going to do?" And her reply broke something in me that I didn't even know was left to break. "I can't come without him." "I'm sorry." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to scream. To say, "How dare you?" To tell her she was throwing away the chance to meet her granddaughter in the first moments of her life. To tell her she was choosing a man who used fear like a leash over the daughter who had once clung to her every word. But I didn't. I just sat there, the phone hot against my ear, tears dripping silently onto a stack of baby blankets. "I'm tired, Mom," I said, finally. "I think I need to go lie down." "I love you," she said quickly. I didn't answer. I ended the call. I didn't sleep that night. My husband, Jonah, held my belly like it was a fragile planet, humming to our baby in the darkness. His hands were always warm, anchoring everything Frank was not. "Do you want her here?" he asked quietly. I nodded, tears falling silently onto my pillow. "Then let's find a way. Just you and her." But how do you save someone who doesn't think she needs saving? How do you rescue a woman who keeps choosing her own prison? The next morning, I woke to a text from her. "I've been thinking, maybe I could say I'm going to visit your aunt. He wouldn't suspect that. I could stay a night or two. But if he calls, you can't say I'm with you." I stared at the screen. The words made my stomach twist. Not with joy, with dread. Because even now, she was asking me to participate in her lie. To help her sneak out like a teenager afraid of being grounded. But she wasn't afraid of being grounded. She was afraid of being abandoned. of not being loved the way Frank had trained her to believe love only worked. Conditional, controlling, confining. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I sat by the window, hand on my belly, watching the gray morning stretch itself across the skyline. I whispered to the baby growing inside me, like I often did. You will never have to wonder if you're enough, I promised. You will never have to earn love by shrinking. You will never be told to be quiet just to keep the peace. And I meant it, even if it meant raising her without my mother in the room. The morning light was pale and cold, sneaking through the half-open blinds like an uninvited witness to a secret too heavy to share. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands wrapped tightly around a warm cup of tea I barely tasted. My phone buzzed again. It was Mom. "I'm packed," her message read. That simple sentence shattered something deep inside me. It should have been a moment of relief, but instead, it felt like a line in the sand, fragile and terrifying. She was going to come. Without Frank knowing. I pictured her, standing in their small kitchen, stuffing clothes into a suitcase, trying to move silently while he barked orders from the other room, demanding control even over the air she breathed. I thought of all the nights she must have spent lying awake, torn between the woman she wanted to be and the wife she felt trapped to remain. Trapped. That word echoed through my mind like a dull drum. And yet, here I was, anxiously waiting for her to break free. When she arrived, it was late afternoon, just as the sky was beginning to bruise with the first hints of twilight. I opened the door, and there she was, my mother. Looking smaller than I remembered, a shadow of herself in the soft cardigan she wore and the tiredness etched beneath her eyes. "Mom," I whispered, my throat tight. "You made it." She managed a weak smile. "I didn't think I would. I'm sorry I waited so long." I pulled her inside, and the door shut behind us with a quiet click that sounded like a promise. We sat on the couch, the room filled with a silence heavier than words. She looked at me, eyes glossy and raw. "I was scared," she finally said, voice breaking. "Not just of him, but of losing you." My heart clenched so tightly I thought it might stop. "I'm scared too," I said. "But I need you here now. For the baby. For me." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm here. And I'm sorry for not being here before." But the moment was shattered by the shrill ring of the phone. Her face went pale. "It's him," she whispered, hands trembling as she grabbed the phone from the table. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw everything in her eyes, the fear, the shame, the quiet submission that made me ache for her all over again. When she hung up, her voice was barely audible. "He knows," she said. "He's coming." Panic swirled in my chest like a storm. "Mom, you have to hide. You can't let him find you here." She shook her head. "No. He'll come for me, and if I'm not here, I don't know what he'll do." I wanted to scream at her to leave, to run, to fight. But all I could do was hold her hand and whisper, "You're safe with me. I won't let anything happen to you or the baby." Hours passed like a slow nightmare. Every creak, every knock, sent my heart racing. Every shadow seemed like him. We didn't sleep. We sat in the dim living room, the soft hum of the baby monitor the only sound between us. At one point, Mom broke down, sobbing into my shoulder. "I wanted to leave him years ago," she confessed through gasps. "But I was scared. Scared he'd hurt me, or worse, that he'd hurt you and your brother. I stayed because I thought love meant sacrifice." I kissed her hair, my own tears falling. "No one should sacrifice themselves to be loved," I said. "Especially not like that." The next morning, there was a knock at the door. My heart dropped. Mom looked at me, her eyes wide and terrified. "I'm going to answer," she whispered. "No," I said, standing between her and the door. "You don't have to." But she moved like a ghost, unlocking the door slowly. It wasn't him. It was Frank's friend, the one who had always been his eyes and ears. He smiled politely, but his eyes were sharp. Just checking in, he said smoothly. My mother forced a smile. Thank you, she said softly, then closed the door as soon as he left. We both collapsed onto the couch, breathless and scared. I can't stay like this, she said. I need to face him. No, I said fiercely. You don't have to do this alone anymore. Her hands gripped mine. I'm so tired of fighting. But I don't want to lose you either. The chapter ends with her looking at me, tears shining, a flicker of hope breaking through years of pain. I want to be free, she said. For you. For the baby. And I knew then, the real fight was just beginning. I jolted awake, heart hammering, the baby monitor silent in my hand. Mom's whispered sobs came from the next room. I ran to her, breathless, and found her curled in a ball on the floor, trembling. Frank's here, she said, voice barely a whisper, raw and shattered. He knows I left. I wanted to scream, to protect her, but all I could do was gather her into my arms and promise, you're safe. I'm here. I won't let him hurt you. Her tears soaked my shirt as she whispered, I'm so tired. I don't know if I can do this. The weight of years of silent suffering pressed down on both of us. She looked at me with such desperate vulnerability, like a child seeking refuge from a storm. Then the door slammed open. Frank stood there, his face twisted with rage, eyes burning with fury. You think you can just leave? You think you can run? His voice was low, dangerous. I stood in front of Mom, my own voice shaking but fierce. She's not running from anything anymore. Frank laughed, a cold, bitter sound. You don't get to protect her. Not anymore. He stormed forward, his presence suffocating. Mom's knees buckled, but I caught her. Please, she begged him quietly. Let me go. Let me be. But Frank's eyes darkened. There are consequences for leaving, he growled. I swallowed the lump in my throat and faced him. If you care about her, you'll let her go. Now. Frank sneered and then, shockingly, turned on his heel and stormed out the door, slamming it behind him. For a moment, silence fell like a fragile blanket. Then Mom broke down completely, sobbing into my arms. I'm scared, she whispered brokenly. I've never been this scared before. I stroked her hair, feeling tears of my own spill over. You're not alone anymore, I said fiercely. We'll get through this. Together. But the fight wasn't over. That afternoon, Frank began calling nonstop, each ring a blade slicing through our fragile calm. Mom would freeze with every call, her hands trembling as she debated whether to answer. I can't keep living like this, she said that evening, her voice cracking with exhaustion. I took her hands in mine. Then it's time. Time to get help. She nodded, a flicker of hope and fear in her eyes. The next days blurred into a whirlwind of whispered plans, hushed phone calls to shelters, and secret arrangements. But every step forward felt like walking on broken glass. One night, I caught her staring at the baby monitor, tears streaming silently. I'm sorry you have to see this, she whispered. I shook my head. You don't have to apologize. You're brave. Then, just when it seemed like we might find a sliver of peace, Frank showed up again, this time at my door. His face was calm but cold. I'm done playing games, he said. If you keep hiding her, you're choosing sides. My heart shattered. I'm choosing safety. For my family, I said, voice steady. Frank's expression twisted into something unreadable. You think you can keep her away from me? You think you can keep me away from my family? No, I said, my voice trembling but resolute. I'm keeping you away from my child. He laughed, cruel and low. We'll see about that. As he walked away, I felt the heavy weight of everything pressing down, the fear, the anger, the heartbreak. But also something else. Hope. Because for the first time, we weren't hiding in silence. We were fighting back. The morning light spilled softly through the curtains, but inside the house, a heavy silence hung like a storm cloud. My mom sat on the edge of the couch, eyes red and puffy from crying the night before. I had stayed up with her, holding her hand, promising that everything would be okay. But in my heart, I wasn't sure. Her phone buzzed again. It was him. She looked at it as if it burned her, then quickly put it face down on the coffee table. "Don't answer," I said softly, but the fear in her eyes was too deep for words. She nodded, but the tension twisted tighter in my chest. Every ring, every vibration, was a reminder that he still held a grip on her life, and, in a way, on mine and my baby's too. Later, I found Mom in the kitchen, clutching a mug but barely drinking. "I can't do this," she said, voice breaking. "He's everywhere. In my head, in my phone, in every quiet moment." I reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You're stronger than you think. But you don't have to be strong alone." Her laugh was bitter. "I don't even recognize myself anymore. How did I let this happen?" I swallowed hard. "It's not your fault. It's his. And we're going to find a way out." But then came the twist no one saw coming. That afternoon, while I was helping Mom pack a small bag, just essentials, in case she needed to leave quickly, the front door creaked open. There he was. Frank. Calm. Collected. Dangerous in the way only abusers can be when they think they're in control. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Mom. "I told you not to do this," he said, voice like ice. Mom froze. "I'm staying," she whispered. Frank smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "So you want to fight, huh?" I stepped forward, standing between them. "You're not welcome here." Frank turned his gaze on me, his voice low but threatening. "You don't know what's good for you." Then the moment shattered everything. He lunged. Not physically, not yet, but he grabbed Mom's arm roughly enough to leave a bruise. "I'll break you if you leave me," he hissed. My heart stopped. Mom gasped, tears flooding down her face. I grabbed her other arm and pulled her close. "Get out," I said, voice trembling but fierce. Frank hesitated, then shoved the door open and left with a cold promise hanging behind him. Mom collapsed into my arms, shaking. "I'm so scared," she sobbed. "What if he hurts me? What if he hurts the baby?" I held her tighter, feeling my own tears fall. "You won't let him," I whispered. "We'll call the police. We'll get a restraining order. You don't have to live in fear." She nodded, exhausted but determined. That night, we sat together, making calls, reaching out to shelters, and planning how she could escape. But then came the heartbreak. "I don't want to leave him," she said quietly. "Even after everything, I still love him." I stared at her, stunned and heartbroken. "Why? After what he did? After how he scared you?" She looked away, ashamed. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm afraid. I'm afraid of being alone." The words hung in the air, heavy and crushing. I took her hand, squeezing it. "You're not alone. You have me. You have your granddaughter. And you have a future that doesn't include fear." She looked at me, hope flickering through the pain. "But it's so hard," she whispered. "So damn hard." And in that moment, I realized that our fight was only just beginning. Not just against Frank, but against the past, the fear, and the invisible chains that bind us. The next morning came too soon. A quiet kind of dread settled in my chest as I stood by the window, watching the sunrise paint pale streaks of gold across the sky. Mom hadn't slept. I hadn't either. We were both haunted. Her by his hands, me by the hollow way, she said, "I don't want to leave him." That was the cruelty of it all. She was still tethered to him by guilt, fear, and decades of slowly fading pieces of herself. Love wasn't supposed to look like a prison. But for her, it had become just that. She sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a cardigan she used to wear when she read to me as a child. It hung on her like a memory. Her coffee sat untouched. "I called him this morning," she said quietly, eyes cast downward. The cup I was holding trembled in my hands. "You what?" Her shoulders caved in further. "I told him I needed space. That I needed time to think. I couldn't bring myself to say it. Not yet. I swallowed hard, fighting back the wave of disappointment that crashed over me. You don't need time to think, I whispered, trying not to sound angry. You need safety. You need peace. I know, she said, barely audible. I've never left anyone before. I stayed with your father through everything, and then with Frank. It's all I've ever known. My heart ached for the little girl inside her who had never been taught what real love looked like. But what about your granddaughter? I asked, softer now. She's going to need you. I need you. That broke her. Tears slid down her face in silence. She nodded once. Then again, firmer. You're right, she said through a sob. I have to do this. We made a plan. She would pack a bag and go stay with my aunt, her older sister, someone Frank didn't get along with and never visited. She would give herself time, just a week, to breathe without him hovering over her. Just enough time to remember what it felt like to be her own person. But just as the first moment of hope began to bloom, it was crushed. That night, he came back. It started with banging on the front door, then shouting, then silence. I peeked through the blinds and saw him, Frank, standing on the porch, shoulders square, a look of smugness twisted on his face. He held up his phone. If she doesn't come out, I'm calling the police. She's my wife. Mom stood frozen behind me. He can't do that, I said quickly. You're safe here. You're allowed to leave. Her lips trembled. He knows I didn't pack everything, that I left without saying goodbye. He'll twist it. I grabbed her hand and took a shaky breath. Then let him. You don't owe him anything. Not anymore. But he didn't leave. He sat in his car outside the house for hours, engine idling, headlights like eyes that refused to blink. Mom paced like a caged animal. I can't live like this, she whispered. I can't make you live like this. You're not making me, I said gently. He is. I was exhausted, and I was angry, but more than anything, I was terrified that this would be the moment she gave up. Around midnight, the engine finally turned off. He was gone, but he left something behind, a voicemail. I played it for her on speaker, and every word twisted like glass under our skin. You think you're clever? You think she can protect you? This is just a phase. You'll come home. You always do. And when you do, don't expect me to forgive this stuff. Don't forget who feeds you, who loves you. Don't forget what I can do. Mom sat down, eyes glazed, face pale. I wrapped her in a blanket and held her. I don't think I can do this, she whispered. I want to be strong for you, for the baby. But I'm still scared. I still love him. And that makes me hate myself. I pulled away, just enough to look at her face. Don't ever hate yourself for loving someone who fooled you, I said gently. It just means your heart was good. He took advantage of that. But it doesn't mean you can't leave. The next day, we filed for a protective order. My husband helped. He sat next to Mom during the call with the legal advocate. She clutched a pillow in her lap the entire time, like armor. When she hung up, she looked at me with wide, fragile eyes. Do you think he'll really stay away? I didn't lie to her. I don't know. But I know that we will protect you. You're not alone anymore. That evening, we set up a cot in the nursery. Mom watched me arrange baby clothes, brush a stuffed bunny's ears, and fold tiny socks. She touched my swollen belly, resting her hand there with a strange kind of awe. She's going to have a better life, right? She asked. I nodded. She's going to grow up knowing what love really looks like. Because she'll have you. Outside, the clouds began to gather, and the first drops of rain tapped gently against the windows. It would be a stormy night, but we had each other. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a beginning, not an end. I was 38 weeks pregnant when the nightmare returned. At first, things had started to feel almost normal. My mom had been living with us for 2 weeks. She cooked dinner. She washed baby onesies and folded them into neat, perfect stacks. She started humming again, nothing in particular, Just little tunes, sometimes off-key, always soft. I'd catch her staring at me sometimes, like she was trying to remember me fully, not just as her daughter, but as the woman I'd become. It made my throat tighten. But just as our world began to stitch itself back together, the past came knocking again. It was a Thursday. Quiet, gray, and cold. Mom was in the kitchen when she saw the envelope tucked inside our mailbox. No stamp. Just a single sheet of paper inside, with her name scrawled across it in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere. The loops of the Y curled like a noose. You think you can hide forever? You think she can protect you? Tick-tock. She didn't cry. She just handed it to me in silence. Her hand was trembling. My husband took a photo of it immediately. We called the police. Again. But without fingerprints and without witnesses, they couldn't do anything. It's probably nothing, the officer said with a sigh. Could be someone playing a prank. He's not a prankster, my mom said, voice brittle. He's a man who breaks things he can't control. The officer didn't know what to say to that. That night, I found her sitting in the rocking chair in the nursery, clutching the same letter like a ghost. I was 19 when I met your stepdad, she said quietly, not looking at me. He bought me dinner and told me I was special. I hadn't been told that in a long time, maybe ever. I sat beside her, my back aching, and listened. He didn't hit me, not at first. He never even raised his voice. He just started asking questions. Where I was, who I talked to, what I spent money on. It felt like love at the beginning. Like someone finally wanted me all to themselves. And by the time it started to hurt, I thought it was too late. Tears slipped down her cheek. I let that man take so much from me. Years. Friendships. You. I grabbed her hand. You didn't let him, Mom. He took it. That's what abusers do. They drain you until you forget what full feels like. She sobbed then. Deep, broken sobs that had been waiting to rise for decades. I missed so much of your life, she choked out. You were hurting, and I wasn't there. I stayed with a man who made me believe I was nothing without him. And now I'm scared it's too late to be your mother. I pressed her hand to my belly. It's never too late, I whispered. You're here now, and you're going to be her grandmother. The next morning, my water broke. It wasn't dramatic, no gush, no shouting. Just a quiet trickle in the bathroom and a feeling like something had shifted forever. I called my husband. He raced home. My mom was calm, steady. A pillar of warmth and quiet courage. You've got this, she told me, squeezing my hand. I know you do. The hospital was a blur of beeping machines, whispered instructions, and sharp, shuddering pain. I screamed. I wept. And when I didn't think I could go on, she was there, my mother, holding my forehead, whispering stories from when I was small, how I used to curl up in her arms like I belonged there. You're not alone, she kept repeating. You're never alone. When my daughter came into the world, I was too tired to cry. But when they placed her in my arms, tiny, wrinkled, impossibly perfect, I looked up and my mother was sobbing. Not the kind of sob that comes from fear. The kind that comes from release. She's so beautiful, she whispered. She looks like you when you were new. I couldn't speak. I just held my daughter, and my mother held me, and in that moment, 3 generations of women existed in one circle of warmth and breath and light. But that light didn't last. 2 days later, while we were still in the hospital, Frank showed up. My husband had stepped out to grab coffee. My mom had gone to use the restroom. I was alone in the room, feeding the baby, when the door creaked open. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Nice place, Frank said, stepping inside. Didn't know you could afford private rooms. My blood turned to ice. He wore a baseball cap pulled low. His voice was too casual. I just wanted to see the kid, he said, taking another step forward. That's all. I figured I deserved at least that. I froze. My baby stirred against my chest. You need to leave, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Right now. He smiled. You sound just like your mother. And then my mother walked in. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stepped between us, like a wall. Get out, Frank. He laughed. Or what? You'll call the cops? Again? You really think they care? She reached into her purse and pulled out a restraining order, the real one, granted just 2 days earlier. They care now, she said. You need to go before you're arrested. And if you ever come near my daughter or my granddaughter again, I will make sure you rot in jail. He stared at her. And for a moment, I saw it. Fear. Not in us. In him. He left without another word. We sat together in silence afterward. My daughter slept on my chest. My mother clutched my hand. You saved me, I whispered. She shook her head. No, she said. You saved me. That night, as the baby breathed softly in her bassinet, I watched my mother sleep beside her, one hand resting gently on the edge of the crib, as if afraid it would all disappear. We were still fragile, still healing, but we had each other. And in that, there was power. The night after Frank showed up, I didn't sleep. I lay in that hospital bed with my daughter curled against my chest, her tiny breath a fragile thread tethering me to the world. Every sound outside the door made my pulse spike. My mom slept in the recliner by the window, but lightly, like she was half expecting to have to throw herself between me and the door again. I wanted peace. Instead, I felt hollowed out, exhausted, furious, and worst of all, ashamed. Ashamed that Frank had still found his way in. That he'd managed to slither past every boundary. That even now, with a restraining order, my brain still screamed he's coming back every time a shadow passed beneath the crack in the hospital door. We were discharged the next morning. The nurse handed me my daughter swaddled like a little bean, and suddenly it hit me. There was no going back. This was real. This was mine. This tiny, beautiful, helpless thing needed me to be whole, and I wasn't. I didn't cry in the car. But as soon as the front door closed behind us and my mom helped me sit on the couch with the baby asleep in my arms, I broke. Mom, I whispered, I don't know if I can do this. She sat beside me and wrapped her arms around us both. You are doing it, she said. And you're doing it beautifully. But you've been holding so much for so long. Let it out. Let me carry some now. The days blurred after that. Nursing. Crying. Diaper changes. Crying. My body still felt like a battlefield. I bled for weeks. I leaked milk at random. I couldn't recognize myself in the mirror, my hair knotted, my eyes dark, my stomach soft and scarred. But my daughter would look up at me with wide, trusting eyes, and I'd remember. This was love. Not the twisted, choking kind Frank called love. Not the guilt-drenched silence my mom lived in for years. This was real, pure, terrifying. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after we got home, I found my mom in the backyard with her phone to her ear. She didn't know I was watching from the kitchen window. Her voice was hushed. I'm not coming back, Frank. No. I said I'm not. I'm done. If you send anything else to the house, the police will handle it. No, you don't scare me anymore. Then she said it, words I never thought I'd hear. I want a divorce. She hung up. And then she cried. But it wasn't despair. It was relief. That night, I made her tea and brought it to her in the nursery. The baby was asleep in her bassinet, arms up like she was flying in her dreams. I heard you today, I said softly. My mom looked up. I wasn't hiding it, she said. I needed to say it out loud to him before I could believe it myself. I'm proud of you. She let out a shaky laugh. I'm terrified. Me too. We sat in silence, just two women clinging to the truth that change was still possible. But Frank wasn't done. A few days later, a car parked across the street. Same car, same time every night. No one ever got out. My husband noticed first. Then me. Then my mom. We didn't need proof. We knew it was him. We called the police again. They patrolled the area, took our statements, increased the distance of the restraining order. But it felt like shouting into the void. What could they really do unless he did something? And I wasn't waiting for that. I want to move, I told my husband that night. I don't care where. I don't care how. I just need to be somewhere he's never seen. Somewhere he can't reach. He agreed instantly. We started searching the next day. The final straw came a week later. It was 2 a.m. The baby had just fallen asleep after hours of crying. My mom and I sat together, spent and silent, when a brick crashed through the living room window. It missed my mom by inches. On it, written in black marker, "You're ruining everything." The police finally had enough to arrest him. They picked him up the next morning, and for the first time in my life, I saw my mother shake not from fear, but from the weight of finally being free. "I can breathe," she whispered. We moved 2 weeks later. A modest little house in a sleepy town 2 hours away. Fresh paint. A backyard. No ghosts in the closets. My mom moved into the guest room and started therapy. She signed the divorce papers a month later. I started therapy too. For the postpartum depression I didn't want to name, for the trauma I'd buried, for the guilt that lingered like a bruise. Sometimes we cried together after sessions. Sometimes we just sat in silence, our grief too big for words. But there was healing too. Laughter. Baby giggles. Late-night feeding sessions where I'd hum the lullabies my mom once sang to me and she'd sing along. One night, a few months later, I sat rocking my daughter under the stars. My mom brought out 2 mugs of tea and sat beside me. "You know," she said, "I used to think love meant staying. No matter how much it hurt. No matter how much I gave up. I thought that was strength." She turned to me, her voice thick with tears. "But now I know it takes so much more strength to leave." I nodded, holding my daughter tighter. "And even more to stay gone," I said.